On a humid afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, the air clung to the skin, making everyone a bit on edge. Emma found herself in the old house of her friend Lucy and her father, Mark, sorting through some things Lucy had left behind. Mark was a tall man with broad shoulders and a deep voice that always carried a hint of authority. He was kind, or at least that was how Emma had always perceived him, often offering her a cold drink or asking about her mother. But today, there was something different in his gaze, a glimmer she couldn't quite identify. They were in the living room, surrounded by boxes filled with Lucy's books and clothes. The weight of Lucy's absence hung heavily in the air, the disarray of her life, her stories, and memories constantly reminding Emma that she was no longer there. As they worked through the boxes, Mark suggested taking a break. Emma nodded, wiping the sweat from her forehead, the heat of the day pressing down on her. She welcomed the chance to catch her breath before diving back into the chaos. Mark led her down the hallway toward the kitchen, where the faint smell of old coffee lingered. He paused at the bathroom door, and Emma thought he was just going to grab a towel or something to deal with the heat. Instead, he turned to her with an unreadable expression, gesturing for her to follow him inside. A slight twist of anxiety knotted in her stomach, but she pushed it aside. This was Mark, Lucy's father. She had known him for years. There was nothing to worry about, right? The bathroom was small and dimly lit, the cool tiles pressing against her bare feet. As she stepped inside, she glanced up at the mirror above the sink, taking in her reflection. Her black curls clung to her neck from the heat, and her face was flushed from the effort. Just as she began to feel a sense of relaxation, Mark closed the door behind them, the soft click of the lock sending an unexpected jolt through her body. Her heart skipped a beat. She glanced at him, confusion bubbling up inside her, but he didn't speak right away. He leaned against the sink, his eyes locked onto hers. His gaze felt heavier than it should, and Emma shifted uncomfortably under its weight. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice low and almost a whisper, as if he were choosing his words with care. "You're a beautiful girl, you know that, right?" Emma froze, unsure how to respond. Compliments had always made her shy, but this felt different. There was something off about it. The way his voice lingered on each word suggested there was more beneath the surface, something she couldn't quite grasp, but it made her skin tingle with unease. She managed a small smile, her throat tightening, and murmured a quiet thank you, though her mind was racing with questions. What was happening here? Why did it feel like the air in the room had thickened all of a sudden? Mark stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, subtle yet strong, mingling with the humid air of the bathroom. She wanted to step back, to create some distance between them, but she felt frozen in place. His presence was now too close, too overwhelming. His eyes remained fixed on hers, but they also dropped, taking in how her dress clung to her body, the way her curves caught the light. She wore a lightweight, vibrant red cotton dress that hugged her hips, accentuating her figure in the heat of the day. Her braided leather sandals crossed elegantly over her feet, and a simple silver necklace with a cross pendant hung just above her neckline, adding a subtle touch of charm. He moved even closer, and his next words sent a shiver down her spine. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as Mark's voice broke the silence. "I've noticed you for a while now," he said softly, as if trying to be gentle. But his tone didn't feel gentle, it felt heavy, unsettling. His gaze roamed over her, lingering on her hips, the way her dress hugged her figure, and she felt a knot form in her stomach. "Your figure, your smile, everything about you is special," he continued. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, and Emma struggled to process them. They felt too loaded, too intense, and she didn't know how to respond. Her heart raced, pounding in her chest like a drum. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. His eyes were fixed on her in a way that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. An uncomfortable tension filled the small, dimly lit bathroom, and she desperately sought a way to understand what was happening. Heat rushed to her cheeks, and she instinctively looked down at her feet, focusing on her braided leather sandals, which suddenly seemed like the most interesting thing in the room. The rhythmic thumping of her heart echoed in her ears, drowning out everything else. Emma wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from someone like Mark. He was older, a figure she had trusted because of her friend Lucy. He had always been there for her, offering advice when she needed it most. But the way he looked at her now felt anything but paternal. There was something unsettling in his gaze, something that made her stomach twist. It was as if a weight pressed down on her chest, suffocating and heavy. Then, with a calm confidence, he spoke again. His words flowed from his mouth as if rehearsed, as if he had already decided what he wanted to say. "I'll give you $500, he said, his voice steady and controlled, as if he had thought about this long before stepping into the bathroom. "Just a moment, a brief instant with you. Nothing complicated, just you and me here." The number hit her like a cold wave crashing against her chest. Emma stumbled internally, trying to find her balance amid the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions that followed. $500. At 22, working part-time at a restaurant, she barely scraped by each month. Most days, it felt like she worked just to survive, to pay rent, to buy food for the essentials. $500 wasn't just a number, it was a lifeline. It could mean new shoes, a month's worth of bills paid, a chance to breathe without the constant weight of financial worries pressing down on her. For once, she wouldn't have to stretch her paycheck to make it last. But it wasn't just about the money, it was the way he said it, so calm and assured, as if he believed it was something she would want, something she would appreciate, as if she were some kind of prize he was offering, something easily exchanged. And in the way he looked at her, there was something new. His eyes no longer held the usual carefree demeanor. He was watching her, calculating, as if she were worth desiring, worth possessing. It felt as if he saw her for the first time, not as Lucy's friend, but as something entirely different, something to be coveted. The weight of his gaze twisted her stomach, a strange mix of confusion and something deeper, something she didn't want to acknowledge. Her pulse quickened, thoughts swirling chaotically in her mind, colliding with one another in a dizzying blur. She stood there, frozen, unable to move, her heart racing so loudly she was sure he could hear it too. A part of her, the logical part, the always cautious and calculating part, screamed for her to flee. She wanted to brush past him, to run out of the bathroom and not look back. She wanted to shout, to ask him what was wrong, to remind him who she was, who they were. The air in the small bathroom felt thick, almost suffocating, as Mia stood frozen in place. She could hardly believe what had just transpired. Antonio, the father of her best friend Lucy, was standing before her, his presence both commanding and unsettling. He was not just a mentor or a protector, he was a man with a proposition that sent her heart racing. "Are you really considering this?" she thought, her mind racing back to the countless times she had felt like she was running on empty, always one step behind. The weight of her financial struggles pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The thought of $500 was intoxicating, a lifeline that could ease her burdens, even if just for a moment. But the price of that lifeline was something she hadn't anticipated. His gaze was intense, piercing through her defenses. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time, not as Lucy's friend, but as someone desirable, someone worth pursuing. The way he looked at her made her stomach twist in a confusing mix of fear and something else, something she couldn't quite name. Just this once, a small voice inside her whispered, battling against the logical part of her that screamed to run. She thought of Lucy and how she would react if she ever found out. Would she understand? Would she forgive her? Okay, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, more a sigh than a declaration. The word hung in the air, surreal, as if it had escaped her lips without her permission. Antonio's face broke into a smile, not one of relief or joy, but one that suggested he had been waiting for this moment. Good, he said softly, his voice almost too smooth. Don't worry, you won't regret it. Regret. The word lingered ominously, but she pushed it aside as he stepped closer, filling the space between them with his presence and the scent of his cologne. It was intoxicating, a promise of something more, something she didn't fully understand. Mia felt like a marionette, suspended in time, unable to move as he approached. There was an urgency in his movements, a calculated grace that made her heart race. The world outside faded away, leaving just the two of them in that cramped bathroom. What happened next was a blur, a series of movements that felt disconnected from reality. Her nerves twisted in her stomach, and adrenaline surged through her veins as if she were caught in a storm. There was something deeper lurking beneath the surface, fear, perhaps, or a strange desire to reclaim control, even if just for a moment. Antonio was gentle, she would give him that. His hands were soft and careful, tracing the lines of her body as if memorizing her silhouette. His fingers lingered in places that made her heart race, but his touch didn't feel demanding. Not at first. It was almost as if he was studying her, savoring every inch of her skin as if he had all the time in the world. He murmured sweet nothings, his voice low and soothing, telling her how beautiful she was, how perfect. She had heard those words before, but never had they sounded so hollow, so insincere. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe them. She wanted to be someone worth looking at, someone worth desiring. But deep down, she knew it was all a facade, a mere transaction. In his eyes, she wasn't beautiful, she was simply a means to an end. His touch was a commodity, his whispers nothing more than a sales pitch. Yet, beneath layers of disgust and confusion, she found a small part of herself that craved this attention. She tried to enjoy it, focusing on the money that awaited her, the promise of escape from her mundane life. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, as if each touch was a small promise, a guarantee that he would give her something in return. She felt a flicker of control, a sense that she could handle this. But as the moment stretched on, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was teetering on the edge of something dangerous, something that could change everything. Antonio's voice lingered in the air, a soft murmur that felt both intimate and distant. It was just a moment, he had said, a brief transaction, nothing more. Like a store where you give and receive. Once the exchange was complete, the world around her seemed to settle, but inside, she felt hollow, empty. Her body still vibrated with echoes of what had just happened, while her mind remained detached, disconnected from the reality of the moment. He handed her the money, 5 crisp $100 bills, placing them delicately in her palm as if they were fragile and precious. She stared at them, her fingers trembling as she clutched the cash, feeling its weight. It was both heavy and light. Heavy because she understood the implications of what it meant, and light because it brought her no relief. The money was not a solution, it wouldn't fill the void within her or erase what had just transpired. She reflected on how easily it had passed from his hands to hers, as if it were merely a simple transaction. Antonio thanked her in a soft, almost intimate voice, as if they shared something significant, a kind of understanding. He urged her to keep it between them, those words hanging in the air like a request or a demand. She nodded, her throat tight, struggling to swallow the lump that had formed there. Her heart raced, pounding in her ears, rendering her speechless. Without looking at the money again, she slipped it into her bag, feeling its coldness against her skin. Then, she turned and left the bathroom, her legs shaky, her body moving on autopilot. She stepped out of the house without glancing back, her mind still trying to process everything that had happened. The door clicked shut behind her, and as she entered the outside world, she realized it was the first time in a long while that she didn't know where she was going, uncertain if she would ever arrive anywhere. That night, lying in bed with her eyes fixed on the ceiling, the money hidden in a sock drawer, she replayed everything in her mind. The bathroom, those words, the way she had said yes. A strange mix of shame and power coursed through her, as if she had crossed a line while taking something for herself. She thought about what she could do with that money, how it could change things, even if just a little. But she also thought of Lucia, knowing she could never tell her, that this secret would always stand between them like a wall. The following days were peculiar. She returned to work, smiling at customers and acting as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, she began to notice things more acutely. The glances from men, the way she carried herself, she felt older, as if she had uncovered a part of the world she had previously ignored. Antonio called several times, asking if she wanted to see him again, but she didn't respond. She wasn't sure if it was fear or simply exhaustion. Perhaps it was both. She spent the money slowly and carefully, a new dress, a nice dinner, a little extra to help her mother with bills. Each time she used it, a pang of guilt shot through her, but there was also a flicker of pride. She had made a decision, a difficult one, and she was surviving because of it. She told herself that was life, making tough choices and living with them. Sometimes, she found herself thinking about Antonio, about how he had looked at her, as if she were more than just Maria from the restaurant. It wasn't love or anything like that, but it was something, attention, desire, a kind of validation she hadn't realized she needed. She wondered if that made her weak or strong, or perhaps just human. A few weeks later, Lucia called, her voice bright and full of stories about her new life. Maria listened, laughing at her jokes, but her heart tightened. She wanted to tell her everything, to release the truth and let it go. She wanted Lucia to understand, but she couldn't. Not because of Antonio, but because of herself. She wasn't ready to face what she had done, not out loud. As time passed, Maria began to reflect on her choices more deeply. The weight of her secret pressed against her, a constant reminder of that night. She found herself at a crossroads, grappling with the implications of her actions and the person she was becoming. Each day brought new challenges, and she had to navigate the delicate balance between her past and the uncertain future that lay ahead. In the dim light of the bathroom, Maria stood staring at her reflection, not with shame, but with a quiet, unsettling awakening. It wasn't the money or Antonio that occupied her thoughts. It was something much deeper, something she hadn't fully understood about herself until that moment. That brief, strange interaction had cracked open a part of her soul she had long ignored. It wasn't just about making a choice, it was about making her choice, even if it terrified her to the core. She realized she was capable of taking control of her life, even if the price was something she couldn't entirely comprehend. For so long, she had viewed herself as a victim, a passenger in her own life, swept along by the currents of circumstance. She had been at the mercy of what the world threw at her, trapped in a cycle of survival without truly living. But now, with that memory lingering in the back of her mind, she came to a profound realization that shook her deeply. She had the power to choose. She could make decisions, sometimes dangerous, sometimes regrettable, but they were hers. Even if they were twisted or messy in retrospect, they still belonged to her, and she could not deny that ownership. It was a painful realization that gnawed at her insides, sending chills down her spine at times. The weight of it felt like a heavy coat she didn't know how to wear, struggling to reconcile the person she thought she was with the one she had just become. She had crossed a line she knew she should never have crossed. And yet, there was a strange sense of power in that crossing. She had done something terrifying, and in doing so, she had proven to herself that she was stronger than she had ever believed. No longer was she the girl waiting for someone to come and save her. She had learned in the most painful and difficult moments that survival wasn't just about getting through the days, it was about adapting, evolving, finding ways to move forward when the world seemed determined to overpower her. The world had its rules, but she was learning to bend them to her will. Perhaps growing up was about finding oneself not in moments of triumph, but in the darkest times, when the choices you make don't align with the image you had of yourself. And yet, somehow, those choices become the key to understanding your true identity. It was a harsh truth, a heartbreaking truth, but one she could no longer ignore. She had the strength to survive, even when her choices didn't resemble what she had imagined. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the beginning of something more. The hardest part was living with those choices, with the silent secrets that built walls around her heart, preventing her from truly knowing who she was. Yet, even as those walls rose, she was learning to live with them, to smile beyond them. Some days, she found herself staring at her reflection, wondering if the person she saw was really her. It was a face that had known both the weight of guilt and the lightness of freedom. And she understood that was the price of living. "I am Maria," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the stillness. "This is my story." It was confusing and complicated. It wasn't the one she had imagined, but it was hers, raw and authentic. She was learning to carry it step by step, forging a path that no one else could walk in her place. Perhaps therein lay the true meaning of growth, finding a way to move forward even when she didn't know where the path would lead. As she walked through the cobblestone streets of her neighborhood that night, the echo of unanswered calls from Antonio lingering in her mind, she felt a new tug within her, a forbidden desire she couldn't ignore. She wondered if she would cross paths with him again or if the secret would entwine them once more in a dance of shadows that had only just begun. Subscribe to the channel, many more exciting stories are coming. In the dim light of the bathroom, Maria stood staring at her reflection, not with shame, but with a quiet, unsettling awakening. The flickering bulb overhead cast shadows that danced across the tiled walls, mirroring the turmoil within her. It wasn't the money or Antonio that occupied her thoughts, it was something much deeper, something she hadn't fully understood about herself until that moment. That brief, strange interaction had cracked open a part of her soul she had long ignored, like a forgotten door creaking open in a darkened hallway. It wasn't just about making a choice, it was about making her choice, even if it terrified her to the core. She realized she was capable of taking control of her life, even if the price was something she couldn't entirely comprehend. For so long, she had viewed herself as a victim, a passenger in her own life, swept along by the currents of circumstance. The world had tossed her around like a leaf in a storm, and she had been at the mercy of what it threw at her, trapped in a cycle of survival without truly living. But now, with that memory lingering in the back of her mind, she came to a profound realization that shook her deeply. She could make decisions, sometimes dangerous, sometimes regrettable, but they were hers. Even if they were twisted or messy in retrospect, they still belonged to her, and she could not deny that ownership. It was a painful realization that gnawed at her insides, sending chills down her spine at times. The weight of it felt like a heavy coat she didn't know how to wear, struggling to reconcile the person she thought she was with the one she had just become. The mirror reflected a face she barely recognized, eyes wide with uncertainty, lips pressed into a thin line. She had crossed a line she knew she should never have crossed. And yet, there was a strange sense of power in that crossing, a thrill that coursed through her veins like electricity. She had done something terrifying, and in doing so, she had proven to herself that she was stronger than she had ever believed. No longer was she the girl waiting for someone to come and save her, she was becoming the architect of her own destiny. In the most painful and difficult moments, she had learned that survival wasn't just about getting through the days, it was about adapting, evolving, finding ways to move forward when the world seemed determined to overpower her. The world had its rules, but she was learning to bend them to her will, like a skilled dancer navigating a complex choreography. Perhaps growing up was about finding oneself not in moments of triumph, but in the darkest times, when the choices you make don't align with the image you had of yourself. And yet, somehow, those choices become the key to understanding your true identity. It was a harsh truth, a heartbreaking truth, but one she could no longer ignore. She had the strength to survive, even when her choices didn't resemble what she had imagined. The hardest part was living with those choices, with the silent secrets that built walls around her heart, preventing her from truly knowing who she was. Yet, even as those walls rose, she was learning to live with them, to smile beyond them. Some days, she found herself staring at her reflection, wondering if the person she saw was really her. It was a face that had known both the weight of guilt and the lightness of freedom, a delicate balance she was still trying to master. "I am Maria," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the stillness, echoing softly against the bathroom tiles. "This is my story." The words felt foreign yet empowering, as if she were claiming a piece of herself that had been lost for far too long. As she walked through the cobblestone streets of her neighborhood that night, the echo of unanswered calls from Antonio lingering in her mind, she felt a new tug within her, a forbidden desire she couldn't ignore. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant laughter from a nearby cafe, where friends gathered, oblivious to her turmoil. She wondered if she would cross paths with him again or if the secret would entwine them once more in a dance of shadows that had only just begun, a dance she both feared and craved. Subscribe to the channel,